So special occasions and important events can be fun to look forward to, and they can be fun and enjoyable to celebrate. And sometimes those high times can be even more exciting or more enjoyable when they happen in a place or with people that you don't normally see. So for example, you might particularly enjoy a family reunion or a school reunion if it happens somewhere else, somewhere where you don't live and somewhere where you aren't all the time. You might enjoy a special program or seminar held at a church where you are a visitor, not the place you always go, but somewhere different. Part of the fun of camp meeting is the opportunity to enjoy spiritual fellowship with people that you might not normally see in a different setting. It's kind of fun once in a while to be somewhere else. But the reality is, for most of us, many or perhaps most of the special events of our lives tend most often to be experienced in familiar surroundings with people who are regularly a part of our everyday lives. That's where most of the special events happen. And certainly these celebrations and events can also be very enjoyable and meaningful, even if it is in a familiar place and with familiar people. But have you ever had it happen that the time for a special occasion arises, but you're just not really in the right frame of mind to enjoy it like you would like to, or you should enjoy it? I'm talking about situations where maybe it's like your wedding anniversary tomorrow or today, but you've just had a momentous, shall we say, difference of opinion with your spouse, and you're like, yeah, let's celebrate our years of life together. Here's another one. Your child's soccer team has made it to the league championship final game. They've done very well, so you're there as a parent to support and watch your child play. And lo and behold, it's a tie, and the game goes into overtime. But if the truth were known, you wish that this game was just over because you've got this big deadline at work that's looming in on you and consuming your mind, and now they're going to play overtime, and you're like, oh, if they would just have a shootout and get this thing done. I don't even care if my kid wins, just get it done. Or how about maybe there's a special service at church, but you're finding it hard to get your mind into it because your mind is still working through a controversial discussion from Sabbath school. Brother A, Sister B who got off on their ridiculous hobby horse again, and it just drives you crazy. Do those things ever happen to anybody else? Or just me? No? Okay, you're all lovely saints. You don't even need to be here. Go straight to heaven. Don't pass anything. Just sometimes that stuff happens. And I guess that's sort of how it was for them, right? It was an important event. It was something that each one of them had regularly celebrated their whole lives. It was an enjoyable and meaningful service filled with all kinds of familiar traditions. And there was kind of this sense that there was something extra special somehow about this year's celebration. But it just seemed like they weren't quite geared up with anticipation like they should have been, like they would have thought they would have been. True enough, yes, it was the right time, the time had come, but they just weren't really in the right frame of mind. And had they been given time to reflect on it, yeah, they would probably rather observe this occasion with each other more than with anyone else. But right now, truth is, it didn't feel so great. Because the same old group was getting pretty old, if you know what I mean. In fact, they were really starting to wear on one another's nerves. It just seemed like this Passover meal just came at the wrong time. For you see, they were still steaming over what had happened. I mean, those two brothers, James and John, and their mommy, had the gall to blatantly ask for the top two positions in the kingdom their leader would be setting up. I mean, talk about nerve, talk about arrogance. Thinking about it, it's just disgusting. How could they do that? And the other 10 disciples, they were sure that they would never be so rude and so presumptuous to come right out and ask before the kingdom was even set up. And James and John were equally sure that the other 10 would have most certainly asked if they had been able to conjure up enough intelligence to be able to think of a way to do it. And if we're going to be honest about it, part of the problem here was that Jesus didn't seem to be really dealing with this issue very effectively. You know, he usually handled things, but it's like he was doing nothing. And maybe they didn't totally understand what was going to happen, but let's face it, this matter was not going to go away. This thing wasn't finished. It was time that they got the recognition they deserved from the rest of the group. They had been through so much together, and yet it was becoming apparent how little they really knew each other. Sure, of course, without a doubt, Passover was an important time in their spiritual experience. They wanted, obviously they wanted to spend it with Jesus. Who else? But it would be a whole lot easier if he would just put some of these bozos in their place. I mean, things were tense. Everyone was on edge. And even Christ, he seemed troubled. It just didn't feel right. And maybe if the Passover had just come a week or two later, you know, things could have calmed down a little bit. And they would have maybe been in a better mood. But even in their present state, the servant came. And so they gather in the room prepared for the supper. 13 men at one table, probably in pretty close quarters. And the controversy among them, it's not gone. It's there. It's just, the controversy among those 12 is just simmering under the surface. And outwardly, they try to act normal, you know, casually talking to each other about safe subjects, things that really don't matter. No one is going to lose it. Nobody is going to let the others know just how much they're bothered by all this garbage. Besides, this isn't the time. They knew that. This isn't the time to hash this out. But it's there. It's churning through every single mind, and every action, every comment, every little look is evaluated by each one for a deeper, subtle message. Why did he say that? Who are you looking at? What does that mean? The time to begin the ritual meal has arrived, but something very obvious has been left out. Oh, the water and the basin are sitting there, sure enough, but there's no servant to wash the dust from their feet. Kind of like a terrible scar on someone's face that everyone tries to pretend they don't see. They don't notice. I mean, okay, they could live with dusty feet, even though their teacher shouldn't have to. But none of them was going to offer to do the servant's job. Not now, not with what's going on, not at this point. And the delay in beginning the meal is kind of becoming uncomfortable. You know, if Jesus would just start this thing, get it going, we could think about eating and think about something else. But while they sit there and wait, the battle thoughts march back and forth through their minds. And finally, Jesus stands up. Good. Maybe we can get on with it. Maybe things can get going. But what is he doing? Oh no. He's going for the water. And their thoughts race. Maybe he's going to deal with this issue. Maybe he's going to do it. Maybe he's going to appoint someone. And for a brief moment, each one of them thinks, maybe he's going to appoint me. No, not me. I'm too important. And then they think, maybe he's going to wash his own feet. And with that thought comes a feeling of shame. I mean, at least someone, if not everybody else, someone should have washed his feet. Someone should have done that. Maybe I should have done that. And finally, Jesus stands. And he picks up the towel. And when he picks up the towel, their attention is riveted. And they're thinking, no, surely not. No, not him. No, not him of all people. This is not right. This is not their teacher. This is terrible. And even in their contentious state of mind, he came to each one of them. He came to them as their Lord, yet he also came to them, strangely enough, as their servant. And in that simple and yet deeply profound act of kneeling and taking each one of their feet in his hands, Jesus finally in that act broke through all of their self-centered focus. It's an amazing story. And I've always liked how the story was told in the words of a song written by Bob Coughlin, a song called Servant of Servants. And I just want to share the words from that song and give you the opportunity to think again about that night and that story and what happened. It says, on the night before he died, Jesus knew his time had finally come. So he wrapped a towel around his side and began to bathe the feet of those he loved. Kneeling down to wash them with his hands, he revealed a love they did not understand. He was a servant of servants, the meekest of the meek, forsaking his power, choosing to be weak. He was the king of creation and he had the right to reign, but he came to be a servant of servants. As he made his way around the room, the atmosphere was awkward and confused. Why had no one volunteered to do what Jesus gladly chose to do? Everyone was captive to their pride, but Jesus couldn't keep his love inside. Do you understand, he asked after quietly returning to his seat. You are my disciples, and I'm calling you to greater works than these. As I've done for you this final night, do for one another all your lives. He was a servant of servants, the meekest of the meek, forsaking his power, choosing to be weak. He was the king of creation and he had the right to reign, but he came to be a servant of servants. Jesus, a servant of servants. You know, many of us know the story very well. But it's an amazing story, and I just want to read the last part of it again from John chapter 13. If you have a Bible, you're most welcome to follow along. John chapter 13, beginning at verse 12. And to just hear the story again in the words of the Bible. John 13, beginning at verse 12. It says, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. You know, this wasn't a new concept. This wasn't a new teaching that Jesus was giving them. Listen to Jesus when he called the disciples together after James and John had made their little request. This is from Matthew 20, verses 25 to 28. This is what Jesus had already told them. Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. See, this very act of coming to this earth, his whole ministry had been in service to those who should be serving and worshiping him. But with his actions during the Last Supper with the disciples, it's like in that act, Jesus made it crystal clear. In spite of their bad mood, in spite of their bad attitude, Jesus came to each one and he served. And understand that with this act, Jesus confirmed that we're all on a level playing field. If the Lord was willing to serve even Judas, his betrayer, then really there is no one to whom we have the right to withhold our service. You see, Jesus could have come and he could have just showed us how important it was and showed us how to properly serve and worship God. He could have just come and said, let me show you how to worship God. But he took it way further than that, by making it clear that serving God includes serving everyone else who is or should be serving God. That's a whole nother level. Jesus is saying, if I can serve you, you must serve one another. It's a part of the job description of being a servant of Christ. It's part of the job description of being a Christian. We are called to serve our fellow servants. Jesus was willing to serve servants. The question is, are we? Are you? Am I? And frankly, if I say no, how dare we presume to refuse to do what Jesus was willing to do? That's putting ourselves above him. Satan tried that. It didn't work. It doesn't work. It won't work. It's not a good option. See, the disciples, they were interested in serving Christ. They weren't bad guys. They wanted to serve Jesus. That's why they were there. That's why they had followed him through the ups and downs of his popularity. They were willing to be servants. They didn't want to take over the kingdom that they expected him to set up. They didn't want to be God. They were very willing to be servants. They just wanted to be his close servants. They just wanted to be greatest in the servant class. They didn't want to be Jesus. They just wanted to be really good in the next level. But the thing is, we're not called to just serve the master. We're also called to serve the other servants. And in that area, the disciples' interest was definitely lacking. They weren't too excited about that part of it. And isn't it true that sometimes the hardest ones to serve are those ones who we know so well? Or perhaps I should say those who we know too well? Those people, the ones that we live with and work with and worship with and study with on a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year basis. It's sometimes very challenging to serve those who don't always do such a great job of serving us. Those who don't really show that they deserve to be served by us. And it can be a wonderful experience. We have a mission group out right now. We have one that's just come back. Last Sabbath, we heard a mission report about Nepal. It can be a wonderful experience to go somewhere far away and serve people with needs. And, we're just getting to know them, and the service is fulfilling, and they're appreciative, and it's all nice, and that's good. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But then to come back home and serve the same old group around the table, so to speak, to serve your family, you've spent your life with, and your church family, and your colleagues, and your classmates, and your neighbors, to serve them. Sometimes that's the most challenging part. The people way over there is one thing, but the people here are in my face all the time. And yet the concept of serving one another isn't really that difficult. And I think it's expressed very well in a simple little question that someone asked, kind of a general question to humanity. And it goes like this: what do we live for if not to make the world less difficult for each other? A good question. But sometimes just to do that simple little act that would make the world a little less difficult for someone else, man, that's not always easy. Sometimes that sure takes a whole lot of humble chomping on pride so that you can swallow it down. Jesus, a servant of servants, he left us a wonderful example. But it's not just a nice example. Oh, let's applaud Jesus. That was very nice. That was beautiful what you did, Jesus. It is beautiful, but it's not just that. It's beyond that. It's part of his call to discipleship. So maybe I could put the challenge to us in the form of a question. Are you ready for the question? Good. First service, there were 0 people ready for the question. Second service, 1. That is like a 1,000,000% increase, right? Here it goes. This is my question. Will you serve a servant who serves servants and serve the servants he serves? All right? If you say that backwards, it's almost the same as if you said it forwards. Let me run that by you one more time, because it's really what this is about. And the question is this: will you serve a servant who serves servants and serve the servants he serves? I think it's worth thinking about. Will you serve a servant who serves servants and serve the servants he serves? I don't even like the letter S. It's hard for me to say. Today is a communion service, and we begin our communion service with the ordinance of foot washing. Are you in a proper frame of mind for this special occasion? Some of you might be. Some of you are just here. Some of you might be ticked off right now because of something that's going on. But all of us can choose right now to decide what our mindset is going to be. We can choose right now to make this meaningful. You know, in the book, The Desire of Ages, which tells the story of Jesus, there is a chapter, interestingly enough, entitled A Servant of Servants. And this chapter is based on this story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet at the Last Supper. And I want you to listen to these encouraging words written by the author Ellen White. It's from page 650. She wrote there is in man a disposition, and that's man and woman, there is in man a disposition to esteem himself more highly than his brother, to work for self, to seek the highest place, and often this results in evil surmisings and bitterness of spirit. The ordinance preceding the Lord's Supper is to clear away these misunderstandings, to bring men out of their selfishness, down from his stilts of self-exaltation. I love that phrase. That is so graphic. Can you just come down from your stilts of self-exaltation to the humility of heart that will lead him to serve his brother. So just like with the disciples so long ago, the servant of servants comes to us today. He comes to every single one of you, and he comes to me. And he challenges us to follow his example. Oh, and by the way, along with the challenge, he provides the help needed to do it. So in just a few moments, we're going to take part in this foot washing service. For those that are you who may be visiting and not familiar, for this part of our communion service, we go to different parts of our building here. The gentlemen go to the upper room, which is through the lobby and up the stairs in the back corner of the lobby. Ladies meet in the youth chapel over on this side of the church. And husbands and wives who choose to do the foot washing service together, hopefully not always, but once in a while at least, do so in the fellowship hall. When we go to have our foot washing service, that's when we have our children's stories. So the children can stay by here and they can enjoy a story. And then on your way back in, our tradition here at Willowdale is we have the deacons there with the offering collection again. This is like the only church service where we have the offering twice. But it's a special offering that we just take up at communion time. When you come back in, if you wish to give to that, it's for our benevolent fund, which is used to help people that find themselves in an unexpected time of need, whether they're from within or outside of our church family. So in a minute or two, we're going to do all of that. We're going to go have our foot washing service and come back for the remainder of our communion service. Anyone who desires to serve Christ is welcome to participate. You don't have to be a church member. You don't have to have some kind of certification card or something like that. If you want to serve Christ, you can participate. If you're brand new to this and you're like, what are you talking about, foot washing? I've never heard of that before. Hey, you can just come and observe. We welcome observers. You can come and see what's going on and kind of get a sense of how we do this part of our service. But just before we do that, before we go to the foot washing service, to help us prepare our minds, I want to invite you to contemplate this song, Servant of Servants, sung by a group many years ago now named Glad. And as you listen to this song, and as you watch the song as we seek to portray it a little bit, I invite you to review again in your mind the story behind this ordinance. Think about what we're doing and why we're doing it and why it's meaningful as you listen.